Week 14 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickers I have as sleepers this week. The first kicker, Eddie Piñeiro, the Carolina Panthers. So this Panther team, they stall out a lot in the red zone at times this season. And this week in a matchup with best defenses this season in the Philadelphia Eagles, I think they're going to have to settle for field goals. And, Piñeiro might have to trot out there for some long field goals to keep up with points on the scoreboard with Philadelphia. So the last 3 weeks, double-digit fantasy points for Piñeiro. Week 10 versus the Giants, 10. Week 12 versus the Chiefs, 13. And Week 13 versus Tampa Bay, 12 fantasy points. So he's going out there. He's getting opportunities. Like I said, the Panthers' offense has definitely improved, but they're still stalling out in the red zone, and he's been obviously settling for field goals. So this week, I think Piñeiro, once again, could be a decent sleeper option. Available 99% of fantasy leagues. Next kicker, Blake Grupp with the New Orleans Saints. He's out there in tons of leagues, and 93% is Blake Grupp. We know he's got a big boot, and this week a matchup with the New York Giants that give up the 16th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. I think Grupp could go out there, have a decent performance, and he's had double-digit fantasy games 2 out of 4 games. Week 9 at Carolina, 12. Week 10 versus the Falcons, 8. Week 11 versus Cleveland, 5. And Week 13 versus the Rams, 10 fantasy points. So he's got a big boot. Is Blake Grupp. They traded away Will Lutz last offseason because they had confidence in Grupp. And he's played well, and Will Lutz has still had a good career with the Denver Broncos. So I think Grupp right now, in a matchup where there's going to be opportunities versus Giant defense, like I said, who can't stop anyone this season, I think Grupp's a good sleeper option. And the third and final kicker I have as a sleeper is the veteran Nick Folk of the Tennessee Titans. So this week, a good matchup versus Jaguars. Give up the 10th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. He's out there in 97% of fantasy leagues. And the last 3 weeks, 8 or more fantasy points for Nick Folk. Week 11 versus the Vikings, 8. Week 12 at Houston, 18 fantasy points. And Week 13 at the Commanders, 9. So this offense, they've struggled for the most part all season long, having trouble punching the football into the end zone. And this week versus the Jaguars, where their defense isn't that good, and I think there'll be more opportunities for Nick Folk in this game. It wouldn't be surprising to me if he hits that 8 or more point fantasy mark once again with a good matchup and on an offense that stalls out a lot. So that's a few kickers I have as sleepers for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.